Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the MMBC Continuum's 13th annual Economic Development Forum, Moving Forward Together Beyond COVID, Strategies to Reshape and Create a Stronger Economy. We are recognizing Minority Economic Development Week this week with the Economic Development Forum, which started on yesterday and concludes today. And we will end the event on Friday with our Robert R. Church Senior Achievement Awards and virtual lunch. Before we begin today, on behalf of the MMBC Continuum Board of Directors and staff, we want to thank you all for joining us today on Veterans Day. We extend a heartfelt thank you to the many men and women who've served in the military so we all can enjoy freedom and security. We also know a number of businesses are closed today in observance of Veterans Day, but representatives from those companies are with us on their day off, and to you we say thank you. As I shared yesterday, the actionable outcomes from this conference is to move forward together beyond COVID with strategies to reshape and create a stronger economy. But to initiate those outcomes, we have assembled voices from corporate executives and business owners from across the region to share strategies with you throughout the day on panels and during one-on-one live networking exchanges. We ask that you maximize the offerings of this virtual experience. And if along the way you experience any technical difficulties or need assistance, that you visit the technical chat room and submit your questions. So let's get started. We are happy to debut Sweet Talk, a discussion with C-suite executives sharing their perspectives on the economic impact of diversity, inclusion, and equity decisions around the 3 Ps: purchasing, philanthropy, and people. If you Google diversity, inclusion, and equity, you may find that diversity is often perceived to be about perspective, representation, tough conversation, and supporting inclusion. Inclusion prompts answers about creating environments conducive to feedback, supporting diversity, and being open. Equity may be described as fairness, sameness, and valuing diversity and inclusion. Improving equity is to promote justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. Tackling equity issues requires an understanding of the underlying or root causes of outcome disparities within our society. So to lead our discussion today is Kimmy McNeil-Valk, Baptist Memorial Healthcare Corporation's System Director of Corporate Communications. Kimmy is a native Memphian who has held positions at Memphis in May International Festival, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and AutoZone, all promoting tourism, entertainment, and community outreach. Kimmy is a native of Memphis, again, and she's active in the community and has served on a number of volunteer boards. I am pleased to turn this segment over to Kimmy McNeil-Valk.
Thank you, Joselle. I am honored to have an opportunity to be a part of this program today and proud of my company's ongoing support of the MMBC and its efforts to strengthen the capacity and impact of MWBEs in our area. At Baptist Memorial Healthcare, we're committed to helping ensure small, minority, and women-owned businesses get opportunities to succeed and grow, especially during this challenging time when the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our entire community. 7 months ago, when our state and local governments issued executive orders for businesses to close in an effort to reduce the coronavirus spread, many businesses had to quickly implement continuity plans, or find new ways to survive with no definitive answers on what to do. These businesses had to rely on the skills and instincts of their teams, and sadly, they had to make tough decisions about things such as layoffs, eliminating non-essential services, establishing remote work environments, and reduced budgets. While the pandemic has caused many businesses and corporations to reorder their operational priorities, it's easy to assume that key strategic initiatives such as diversity, inclusion, and equity programs would be placed on hold. In May of 2020, business consultant McKinsey & Company presented a strong business case for diversity and inclusion in its report called Diversity Wins: How Inclusion Matters. This report cites diversity and inclusion as a powerful enabler of business performance and notes that companies with leaders who incorporate diversity, inclusion, and equity into their business recovery priorities are likely to emerge from the crisis even stronger. While business leaders are challenged with finding ways to protect their employees and customers' health, navigating operational disruptions, planning for recovery and the next normal, it will likely be equally important for them to ensure that they don't reverse their progress toward diversity, inclusion, and equity. Now more than ever, the path forward leads directly to conversations, strategies, and policies that address these areas. During our discussion today, we will explore with our panelists their views on the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity for businesses and how it aligns with their operational strategies and performance goals for those 3 Ps that Joselle mentioned earlier: people, philanthropy, and purchasing. So without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel. First, we have with us today Ms. Marquita Jack. She's Senior Vice President and Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at First Horizon National Corporation. Marquita oversees diversity, inclusion, and equity programs that support First Horizon's strategic priorities. Her teams work to create diversity, equity, and inclusion learning objectives, and they partner with the talent development team to build best-in-class diversity, equity, and inclusion content into their milestone training and talent processes. She also oversees the external development program relationships and ensures that First Horizon's programs, policies, and initiatives support a diverse and inclusive culture. Marquita began her career with what was then First Tennessee Bank in 2000. She's a native Memphian and serves on a number of volunteer boards. Marquita, welcome. Can you please tell us about First Horizon's corporate philosophy on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and how that is reflected in your human resources?
Good morning, Kimmy, and thank you all so much. And thank you to the MMBC for amplifying this conversation, as it is very important, and we cannot lose sight of it during this time. So as a business imperative, leveraging the power of diversity, equity, inclusion through our 4 strategic pillars, which are workforce, our people, workplace, the culture, the marketplace, which are our customers, and our community, which is equally, if not more important. These things are the catalyst to creating an organizational culture that not only fosters innovation, but also unlocks the potential of every associate. And, the opportunity for our associate and our communities to grow. And so our goal is to create systematic inclusion and equity that really results in business, moving our business forward. There was research done by the Kellogg Foundation that equity can account for about $8 trillion in GDP growth over the next 40 years if we do this right. So it's really important. And not only, I know a lot of people say it's the right thing to do, but humanity needs this right now. And although we've been doing this work for several years, it is exciting to, again, amplify this work and continue the work at First Horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Marquita. Next, we have Mr. David McKinney, Vice President of Government, Public, and Community Relations, Customer Satisfaction at AutoZone Incorporated. David is a proud native Memphian and a graduate of the University of Memphis's Fogelman College of Business and Economics and the Cecil C. Humphreys School of Law. He has practiced law in the private and public sector. He's also held senior level positions and served as a public servant in city, county, and state governments. In 2019, David joined AutoZone, the leading retailer and leading distributor of automotive replacement parts and accessories in the United States, where he now serves as Vice President of Government, Public, and Community Relations, Customer Satisfaction. He is responsible for advocacy, regulatory affairs, charitable giving, media, crisis communication, and external engagement spanning the Americas. David, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
What is Thank you. What is AutoZone's corporate philosophy on diversity, inclusion, and equity in philanthropy?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Kimmy. You probably know it as well as I do, being an AutoZone alum. And thanks to MMBC for hosting this year in, year out. Every year it's important. This year is critically important. And also, as Joselle pointed out, happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans. Well, you know, as a company, AutoZone is considered a leader in the industry when it comes to diversity and inclusion, you know, especially among our close-in competitors. That said, about 7 years ago, not quite 10, about 7 years ago, we formally stood up, made an internal investment to stand up an entire D&I department, where we've continued to experience significant progress in our DEI journey. And it's really a journey. It's not a final destination. It's something you're always working on. And last year, for the first time, we rolled out a corporate social responsibility report that highlights some of our progress in those areas. You know, but aside from many of those types of goals, I believe that two distinct areas when you look at progress in DE&I, you look at leadership at the most senior level, and you also look at what a company is doing with respect to impact. And, you know, I'm pleased to say that, you know, starting this January 2021, 6 of our 14 executive committee members, the most senior leaders of our business day to day, will be ethnically diverse. And we'll put that up against any Fortune 500 company as far as diversity there. You take a look at what we're doing in the community and why it's so important. Since 2018, we have been able to double our spend in charitable giving and partnerships with organizations, mainly in the Memphis and Shelby County area, and those organizations that specifically focuses their effort on diversity and inclusion as their primary goal. So on those 2 points, we are on the journey, but still have a long ways to go, like we all do. But thank you, Kimmy.
Thanks, David. It's so great to hear how AutoZone has advanced this in their mission over the last few years.
Well, you got us started on the right foot.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you very much. Next, we have Dr. Albert Mosley, Vice President and Chief Mission Integration Officer for Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare, where he oversees the healthcare system's community outreach initiatives such as population health, chronic disease self-management, and nurse-family partnership. He also leads other departments, including the Methodist Healthcare Foundation, corporate contributions and strategic philanthropy, behavioral health, the Center for Bioethics and Health Equity, spiritual care, and clinical pastoral education. Before coming to Methodist, Dr. Mosley had a career for more than 20 years in higher education and at a wide range of institutions, including Duke University, Drexel University, and the Johns Hopkins University. He also offers his servant leadership skills to a number of other organizations. Dr. Mosley has degrees from Millsaps College, Duke University, Yale University, and the University of Georgia. Welcome, Dr. Mosley. How are you this morning?
I'm well, Kimmy. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and thank you for joining us. Can you please share with us what are Methodist corporate goals related to diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Yes, so thank you again for the opportunity to share today, and thank you to David and Marquita as well for the introductory comments they've made. At Methodist, we focus on improving every life we touch, and for us that really serves as a foundation for our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, in addition to driving our approach to patient care. So as you know, we are a comprehensive, not-for-profit, faith-based integrated health system, and our mission drives everything we do. So we serve a broad cross-section of our diverse community, and we believe that everyone in all corners of our community should have access to the best patient care available. So as a result of that, we maintain a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to people, philanthropy, and purchasing. So I'll just real briefly share about each of these from our perspective. So when it comes to people, we know that we are stronger and that we are a more high-functioning team when we reflect the communities we serve. So this is from our associates to our medical staff to our senior leadership team and our board of directors. And I have to say that we've made some tremendous progress in intentionally reflecting our community. So for example, our executive leadership team, of which I'm a part, is comprised of 10 people. 6 of those 10 people come from traditionally underrepresented groups. So 6 of us are either Black and or women. This is also reflected in our board of directors. Of our 12 independent board members, nearly half of those individuals are either minorities or women. When it comes to philanthropy, similar to what David indicated about AutoZone, we take a strategic approach to philanthropy where we focus on supporting improvements in social determinants of health. So things like housing, food insecurity, literacy, psychosocial support. And we know that these particular social determinants of health have a disproportionately impact on Black and brown communities. So our emphasis is to strategically focus on those issues and on communities that are impacted by those. And with purchasing, as a large healthcare system, we have a $5 billion economic impact here in the Mid-South community. And we know that we can make a real difference in our community by being intentional about vendor diversity, which we've done, which I'll share a bit more about as we move further along in our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mosley. So now that you've had a chance to hear from all of our panelists, you know that we have the cream of the crop when it comes to the companies in our city and the leaders in our city who focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now remember, we're talking about post-COVID, post-pandemic. How do we move forward in these priorities after the pandemic? And then we're focusing on those 3 Ps that we talked about this morning. So people, purchasing, and the other P. Philanthropy. Yes, exactly. So we're going to start with a conversation with each of you. Again, I'll give each of you a question. Each of you will have a particular focus area. And so I'd like to start with Marquita in terms of people. And so can you tell us during the pandemic, what actions has First Tennessee taken within its employee population to demonstrate that diversity, inclusion, and equity matter?
Yeah, so, it's very important to know at First Horizon, we have always really, in our over 150 plus year history, valued the importance of our people. And during COVID, and post-COVID, that has been no exception. And it's unfortunate, but COVID only amplified the disparities in our communities. And, even people that had jobs may have had trailing effects from COVID. It might be people in their family. And something else that we know about COVID is that it also highlighted and really shone a light when we began to experience social injustices in the community. So to David's point, this is not, it's a journey, and it's something we continue to do. So as a result, we continue to do some things and then improve on programming. So specifically, some of the things we do, the first thing that we did is, host a panel discussion, because we were at this strange intersectionality, Kimmy, between COVID and the social injustices. So it created this tsunami, if you will. And so, and also, with the COVID impacts really disproportionately affected people of color and minorities, because we are on those frontline positions. And so a lot of those displacements, workforce reduction impacted those persons. So some of the things that we began to do is to continue our partnership with Operation Hope, where we really worked with underbanked individuals to help them gain more access. In terms of our people, we were forced to pivot. As a human resources professional, we were on this journey to embracing the remote workforce. Well, obviously, COVID, in order for us to continue our business, forced us to really, now a majority of us, as you can see, for me, we're working from home. So COVID, it enabled us to unleash that potential in terms of really supporting our employees as they continue to support their families. We added during the panel we had a panel with John Hope Bryant, Dr. Bernice King, and Andrew Young. And while we did talk about the civil unrest in the nation, we really focused on those disparities and getting access to our employees to open up, to have a conversation, to share with us the things that they were in most need of. And as a result, through our benefits, we have now enhanced our benefits to offer things more on mental support for mental illness, getting access to additional funding for our employees, and making sure they have the resources and the abilities to really support their families. Because if they cannot focus and support their families, they cannot work well and have a good mental state to work for us and bring their best self to work. Additionally, during we also offer employee climate surveys, where we get the information from our employees about how they're feeling about their workplace, what things they need. And we enhanced that survey this year to include pandemic-related questionings to really get the climate, to get their voice, to see what it is that they need. Because we can sit in a room and try to determine what our employees' needs are, but the best information comes directly from them. So those are some things that we've done. And so it's really important to ensure that engagement exists. And also working in our communities is very important, and partnering with our community partners to provide resources to those people in our communities that have been impacted by COVID. And even, really, really tactical, offer COVID testing free for our employees on all of our, we're highly represented here in Memphis, but we have a large regional focus as well. So really providing some of those day-to-day things to take the burden off of them as they work through this COVID pandemic, as we all work together through the COVID pandemic.
That's great. It sounds like you all at First Horizon have really, really put a lot of thought into how to transition your team through this challenging time. So thank you for that. David, I want to ask about philanthropy at AutoZone, and what changes did you make in your giving strategy during the pandemic? And what made you make those changes, if you made any?
Well, I think it's an understatement to say that COVID-19 forced us all to make some real sacrifices and some tough decisions. As Dr. Mosley said, we kept health and safety as our top priority throughout the pandemic, and even before and after will be our top priority. We were fortunate enough to be an essential business to keep our doors open to help the motoring public. And I'm proud to say that AutoZone did not have to lay off or furlough a single AutoZoner. And that's important. As it was mentioned earlier about the demographics of individuals who serve on the front lines as essential workers. But, despite any of the challenges in the environment, especially at the outset of COVID, one of the things that our executive committee decided unanimously is really to go the other way from what had been the early trends with respect to philanthropy and COVID. We decided to increase our giving in spite of the pandemic. And that wasn't really an easy decision, because you think about really early March and April, how depressed the economy was. And, in our environment with the depressed economy and limited mobility with respect to stay at home, shelter in place, quarantine orders, it's bad for business. Yet and still, we knew that our community partners needed us, and they needed us the most. And really for us, it was staying consistent with our pledge and values. Those who know AutoZone, Kimmy, I know you know it. AutoZone doesn't have a mission statement. We have a pledge and we have values. And a couple of those values is an AutoZoner always, not when it's convenient, but always embraces diversity and always cares about people. From a practical standpoint, we heard from our community partners, and they were getting it so many ways as far as the negative impact directly from COVID, but also they saw a reduction and are still seeing a reduction in individual contributions as well as corporate contributions, which is a part of the lifeblood of many of the organizations. So we increased our giving efforts, and we were purposeful in targeting those organizations that were hit the most. And another decision that we made is we really tried to centralize our giving within the Memphis and Shelby County community in those areas hardest hit as a result of COVID. So we increased our giving and we're still looking to do more.
That's great. Thank you for what AutoZone does to serve our community and to help our community. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I had a sound issue there. Dr. Mosley, can you share with us share with corporate executives how communities win when diversity, inclusion, and equity in purchasing is included in your priorities?
Yes, thank you, Kimmy, for the question. And before I dive into that, let me just say also that, if there were to be a silver lining to COVID, it is that it has amplified many of the disparities that we already knew existed in our communities around the nation, and most especially here in Memphis. We have, I think everyone, as a result of COVID-19, everyone seems to have a renewed focus now on trying to tackle some of these longstanding and systemic issues of poverty and how intricately linked poverty is to race, and how that plays out even in our in our legal system. And so when we talk about supply chain and purchasing, that has a very strong impact on communities of color in particular, and especially if an organization or a company is not committed to addressing and ensuring that women and minority-owned suppliers are included. So I'll give you a little bit of background about how at Methodist we hardwired our vendor diversity program, and then I'll give an example of how communities win when diversity in purchasing is institutionalized. So about 20 years ago, Methodist spent just over $6 million with women and minority-owned suppliers. So that was about 20 years ago. So let's say the year 2000. We knew as an organization that we could do better, and we also knew that we should do better. And so we made vendor diversity a strategic priority as a company. Our approach was very intentional, and we held ourselves accountable by making progress that we knew we needed to make, by making progress that we knew we needed to make. So, for example, we held ourselves accountable by ensuring that our minority spend was a part of our balanced scorecard, and ensuring that not only just looking at patient quality, not only looking at safety, patient safety, not only looking at service and patient satisfaction, but also looking at how we gave back to our community, in particular, how we gave back or how we engaged in spend with minority and women-owned businesses. So our supply chain team, headed by Larry Fogarty at the time and still now, they took this and they ran with it. They partnered closely with MMBC Continuum. And you fast forward from 2009 to where we are today. So in 2009, just over a $6 million spend. Today, we have over $52 million spend with women and minority-owned suppliers and local small businesses here in the Mid-South. So that's roughly 21% of our total eligible spend. Now, 21% is good, 52 million, that's good, but is it good enough? And to that end, we are continuously working to expand our MWBE spend. So we recognize that women and minority-owned businesses, that the growth of these businesses is vital to the health of our community, and it's also vital to the health of our local economy. And so here's kind of specifically how we made progress. So I kind of gave you, the overview of it, but here's what we specifically did. So we work collaboratively with MMBC to leverage their databases of certified local minority and women-owned businesses. So we had a very strong and continue to have a very strong partnership with the MMBC Continuum. We also engaged in something called piggybacking, where we connected minority and or women-owned suppliers with majority companies in packaged offerings of goods and services. We also engaged in sort of a close day-to-day interaction between our supply chain staff and potential diverse suppliers so that we understood the challenges and the opportunities that diverse suppliers face. We had to modify some of our supplier contract terms related to insurance, payment, and other contractual terms where necessary and appropriate in order to expand the base of women and minority-owned suppliers who were working with us. And then we did some timely monitoring and following up and direct feedback on services provided by diverse suppliers to ensure that our partnership was successful for not only the suppliers, but also for us. And so I can fast forward to just an example of how that has sort of played out specifically in our system and in our community. So there's a company called Action Janitorial Supply that started with us a few years back and started really, really small with us, a minority-owned business. And now, today, this company delivers 9 truckloads of supplies to our facilities on a weekly basis. So that growth for Action Janitorial Supply means that the CEO and owner of that company, Charles Burns, was able to grow his business and also was able to provide employment to a 20-plus person team here directly in our community. And Charles tells us that Methodist is one of the biggest reasons for the success of his company. And we know that because Charles is one of our vendors, that's also one of the biggest reasons that our facilities are clean and are well kept. And so that's just a specific example of how, as an anchor institution, as a corporate entity here in the community, our commitment to minority and women-owned businesses spend has had a significant impact here in the Mid-South.
That's incredible, and it's really interesting to hear how what an impact that Methodist can have on a small and minority-owned business just by helping it to grow and adjust to serving a large system like yours. Now, I know I have a lot of questions, and I know some of our participants probably have questions too, and we will move into a Q&A segment if we have time at the end. What I would like to ask our participants is if you do have a question, please enter it in the Q&A section of our platform here, and then we will be able to pick those up at the end. But I do want to go back through another round of people, philanthropy, and purchasing with our panelists with just one more question for each of them. And I'll start again with Marquita. From a human resources perspective, how can organizations leverage diversity and equity when filling jobs during the pandemic or as a result of the pandemic?
You know, I go back to my previous statement and about the disparities in the types of people, the populations of people that were negatively impacted and displaced. If framed correctly, this is an amazing opportunity from a talent acquisition perspective, because what COVID has forced some people to do is really to, we've heard the term pivot, and really think about what it is they would like to do and make a change. So from a human capital perspective and a talent management perspective, it's important to have a strategy that really highlights transferable skills and how you can apply those in your organization in a non-traditional way. For example, I was watching a report on ABC News about displaced bartenders and how, if you think about it correctly, if you own an insurance firm, you need, when you're doing investigations, the ability to get people to tell a story, to paint a picture. And what other profession better than a bartender, where people have where they're known to open up and tell stories. And so that is a gift that we might not think about. So if you expand that thinking across the board, really looking at how skills, I mean, there can be skills highlighted that in terms of working and their ability to get creative and apply themselves to innovate, because if COVID has done anything, it has caused people to innovate. And we need innovation within our organizations. I know it's an overused word, but I think you have to look at talent somewhat as an onion. You have to create an environment and programming that you get talent as long as they're what we call hungry. So hungry means they're willing to learn, they're willing to grow, they're willing to apply themselves. But as organizations, we have to be prepared for this talent pool by providing equitable programming, development opportunities, and also making sure we offer a livable wage. And so while COVID has absolutely created its challenges, it's also created awesome opportunity from the talent landscape. And even don't forget about those existing teammates that you have or employees. We refer to them as associates in your organizations. And also, if there's remote working opportunities, that expands your talent pool even more. So during this time of the COVID pandemic and post-pandemic, I think it has created a landscape for talent that needs to be unearthed. And then when we get that talent within our organizations, how do we support them, embrace them, and specifically from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, making sure that the organizations that they come in recognize who they are, they're having conversations around diversity and ensuring that ways to reduce turnover, which is really through engagement and professional development.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mosley, let's talk about purchasing again. I know you've already shared with us really one of your best success stories, but do you have another one that you'd like to share, or is there anything else you'd like to tell us about why supplier diversity as it relates to COVID and what we do post-COVID is important?
Sure, I'll share sort of more broadly, more generally, and I see there's a question in the chat that speaks to this as well. As I mentioned earlier, we rely quite heavily upon the MMBC continuum to provide us with valuable assistance in evaluating potential diverse suppliers. And we also rely upon MMBC to assist us with providing documentation of their certified minority or women-owned business status. So we have a very strong partnership with MMBC. MMBC also helps us target selected businesses that we've experienced with, and that also have the products or services that we need as a healthcare system. So that there are very specific things that we're going to be looking for. One of the other ways to expand that, and this speaks to the question that's in the chat, instead of focusing on one specific business, how do you expand those opportunities to ensure that you include others? Again, bearing in mind that there's a limited scope because there are certain products or services that we need as a healthcare system that are very, very specific. But one of the ways we expand it is we engage in community outreach activities, which we've been doing. So we have panel discussions at minority supplier summits. One of the things we've been doing here in our system is that we've been having, prior to COVID, it's a little more difficult to do this now, but having breakfast meetings between minority and women-owned business leaders and our executive leadership team here at Methodist, so we can learn more about the minority and women-owned businesses in our community. And then hosting the MMBC General Membership Meetings. So those are kind of some specific examples of how we expand that base to include even more than just several companies at a time.
Yeah, I thought that was a good question in the chat because sometimes you can decide that you find one company and you feel like you've met that quota, and then you don't think about adding other opportunities to your midst. So that was really great insight and information. So thank you so much for that. And then David, for philanthropy, I know you talked a lot about the types of giving that you do. Why is it important to the communities that AutoZone supports, or the communities where AutoZone has a presence? Why is philanthropy important?
Well, Kimmy, you know this, philanthropy is in our DNA at AutoZone, and it really started with our founder, Pitt Hyde, and really to this day, Pitt and Barbara are still very generous individually and through the Hyde Family Foundation, particularly in the Memphis community with their charitable giving. But, at its core, communities don't operate in isolation. And you mentioned earlier with respect to my title, a part of the work that I do is in government relations. As we all have seen and experienced, government relations and politics can be very divisive and divided at times. Unfortunately, you start to see some of that creep in other spaces. And we've got to not look at, for-profit versus nonprofit, faith-based. This is our community, and it's our responsibility collectively, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, to pour into that community. At AutoZone, we believe some of the greatest impact that you can have is to giving and making significant investments in the community. And one of the things that we do is that we try to incentivize and encourage our AutoZoners not only to volunteer, but also be generous with their giving. And we have a company match to match a portion of what our AutoZoners give from top to bottom. I want to also finish up. Marquita said something earlier that I think is very important. And giving and what you do is not just something that's a feel good. It's really good business. When you are a charitable company, you are a more attractive company. Individuals, people want to work for a company that gives. Our AutoZoners want to work for a company that has a greater purpose outside of just P&L. And that's shown to bear out statistically as well as anecdotally. So when we think about giving and philanthropy and why it's so important, you're supporting those individuals who work for your company. For us, it's our AutoZoners. You're supporting your customers. For us, customers come first. We always put customers first. And you support the neighborhoods and communities that you proudly serve for us throughout the Americas. So that's why it's so important.
Thank you so much. I know that we probably will have some questions. Joselle is going to come back and help me with the questions from the chat. If you have a question and you'd like to submit it, please go ahead and do that in the Q&A section of this platform. I want to thank our panelists again today. One thing that's very apparent here is that when you're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, it's very important that you have people leading these efforts like our three individuals today who have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge about these areas, and know how to pull in those different perspectives that make leading these efforts in our different companies more impactful, not only to our communities, but to our people, and even in the business that we do with other small and minority-owned businesses. So thank you very much for you all and for your time today. I'm going to ask Joselle, are there any questions? From our attendees?
Kimmy, there's one question in the chat, and that one question is, how do you all ensure accountability with minority spend as it relates to diversification among several minority entities as opposed to one specific company? This question appears to be more of a purchasing process. And I don't know if our panel here in their current roles and responsibilities will be able to answer such a granular question. If so, you can give it a try, but it seems more to be a question that would be targeted to an individual procurement staffer as to how they
I'd
do
like
their
to
job.
directly.
Yeah. And I think that Dr. Mosley addressed it a little bit in his comments, but does anyone else have anything they want to add, or Dr. Mosley? Go ahead, Marquita.
Yeah, so while I don't work directly in what we call vendor management and purchasing, as a part of our 4 strategic pillars, one is marketplace, which we partner directly with vendor relations. And one of our goals has always to be able to spread our spend amongst women and minority-owned businesses. So we work very hard and we partner and develop strategies each year to increase that spend. And that strategy has been in place now for at least 6 or 7 years. So we are increasingly working toward continuing that and expanding the opportunity for different types of vendors. As a financial services industry, we have a unique opportunity, as I'm sure all industries do, to really be able to spread our impact across many organizations. And not only do we do that through vendor management, but also from our consumer perspective. For example, we have a Women in Wealth initiative where we educate women, minority-owned, women-owned businesses and help them with resources. So we definitely focus on making sure that we spread our contributions and opportunity for partnership and contracts across that landscape.
Yeah, Kimmy, I'll follow up on that and echo what was really just said and give a quick commercial to MMBC. And Joselle can attest to this, even though it's outside of my specific area of specialty when it comes to supplier and supplier diversity, we work very closely with MMBC. Joselle knows our people very well in our purchasing and supplier units. I think I was a part of a call. It was only a couple of weeks ago, which is ongoing. So, from a business standpoint and from memberships, we really have an asset here in MMBC that we have to leverage, and we are leveraging it at AutoZone.
And I'll just add one other point, Kimmy, to what's already been stated. Capital and construction projects are a huge deal for us. Although some people think that health systems and hospitals probably should divest themselves of capital and facilities, particularly when you look at healthcare in the future. But anyway, as it is now, it's a huge part of who we are. And so one of the things that we've done in our system is that, we post major projects with the Memphis Area Minority Contractors Association, with the Memphis Hispanic Council, and the National Association of Women in Construction. We also make presentations to the MMBC Continuum members about projects and opportunities for subcontractors and suppliers. We work routinely with 2 national construction firms. And while working with those national construction firms, we also relay to them what our goal is in terms of our minority and women spend rate. And we provide those 2 national firms with a list of all minority and women-owned firms that we've previously worked with, so that they could be included in pricing the projects as well. And one last thing, and I'll just mention this because I think it's important to mention. Here at Methodist, we've sponsored 2 minority workforce equity program job fairs, and those resulted in more than 15 firms interviewing over 150 applicants for employment on special projects, specifically construction projects. And these firms solicited participation from local minority and women-owned businesses, as I said earlier. And so there are ways to sort of expand this and make sure that the person who raised the question has a very valid question. You don't want to get caught in the trap of using the same company over and over again, because because in a scenario like that, you actually never begin to expand the wealth and to grow some of the other companies that are out there. But you got to have a strategy in place to be able to do that, and that strategy includes collaborations with places like MMBC, with the as I said, the Memphis Area Minority Contractors Association, the Memphis Hispanic Council, the National Association of Women in Construction. You've got to be in partnership with organizations like these to ensure that you are expanding this across the board.
That's great. What can you tell? I'm assuming a lot of our participants are minority and women-owned businesses, small businesses. And so from what they've heard today, what can you tell them about how do they put themselves in place to benefit from some of these resources that your companies have put in place? not specifically your company, but what should they do? What are next steps for them after today to be able to leverage what they've learned here today about what you do to work with and include diversity, inclusion, and equity across the board in your companies? And I'm sorry, I didn't direct this to anybody, but Dr. Mosley, you were on a roll, so I'll start with you.
Join the MMBC. If you're not a member already, please join. And join the other organizations that I mentioned that are sort of guild specific, so that you can be seen. I mean, there are some amazing, I'll give you some other very, very small examples. Back when the pandemic began in March, we knew that we were gonna, well, at the time, we didn't know we were gonna be in for the long haul. Most of us, I think, probably thought this was gonna end rather quickly. But when we got into April, we realized, hey, we're gonna be in this thing for a while. And so our president and CEO, Dr. Michael Iwicki, wanted to do something for all of our 13,000 associates here at Methodist. And so what Dr. Iwicki said was, okay, I want to provide lunch for all of our 13,000 associates to show our appreciation. This is one of the many things he did. And he could have left it at that. But then he said to me and one other person on our executive leadership team that sort of handled this, he said, I want you to make sure that you support, you know, when we do these lunches, that you order from locally owned restaurants, and specifically if there are Black-owned restaurants that you would seek out, because you know, as he surmised, and as was the case, a lot of these restaurants were really struggling and suffering. So there's one in particular I'll give a shout out to, Lunchbox Eats, which is owned by a Black female. I called her. I said, hey, I need about 1,000 box lunches. Can you prepare those for me? And what she said to me was that we literally saved them for that particular time period because their business was so, they just had so little business going on. So it's, just sort of being intentional in that way. You got to be really, really intentional. You got to have leadership that's intentional. And sometimes it's the small things. And that kind of speaks even to the second question that's in the chat box. It's the small stuff like that where you know the community and you know who are the Black and women-owned businesses in the community. You've got to make sure you support them.
That is important. Giselle, do we have another question in the chat box?
No, we only had those two questions.
Okay, great. Marquita, would you like to add any final words?
Outside of the fact that I just lost the mute, even though I've been using the mute button all morning, it's like, where was it? No. Well, my parting thoughts are, Dr. Mosley says something very important, and it's this notion of intentionality. So from a business perspective, we have to be intentional about reaching out and really making ourselves available and open to these diverse vendors. And likewise, First Horizon has partnered with, for a number of years, MMBC, and we do encourage people to join. And so it's really important to really think outside the box. I've seen a lot of business owners look at their product offerings and really, how do we adjust these things in light of COVID? I've seen some businesses come to us to provide services we didn't even realize we needed, right? So how do you become that business where you look at your offering and services and say, how do I think about what they're not thinking about, right? And so I think that obviously resources and events like this, and this is also amazing. COVID has really highlighted this virtual platform to where people can have access now. And so as organizations creating more opportunities using these platforms and getting small women and minority-owned businesses together to really help them navigate through that, because obviously, it's easier said than done to get creative with your product offerings and services. But I definitely think that we cannot let COVID derail any of our work in this space. 2020 has more than amplified. If you notice, there is literally a job posting in this DE&I space every day. Announcements are going out daily about heads of CDOs of organizations. And, we need to turn this moment into momentum. Some of us in our organizations have been having this conversation for a long time. As a Black woman, we've had these conversations in our circles for a long time. But now these conversations have taken center stage, and we need to make sure that we get this opportunity and we run with it.
That's right. David, what can you tell us about anything you want to tell us about? I know we sort of isolated you into the philanthropy world, but I know that AutoZone does a lot of purchasing, and they, of course, hire people. So is there anything you'd like to tell us in these other 3 Ps about AutoZone?
Hey, Kimmy, I think that was wise to protect me and limit my lane as far as expertise today. I'll just close with a point, maybe a somewhat different perspective, but I think everybody may agree with this. And we talked a lot about what we're doing as organizations and companies. I would like to throw out, it's a dual burden. We've got to be bilateral in this. As we are being intentional as companies, we're also asking our vendors and potential vendors and community partners to also be intentional. Take us, for example, we've got over 6,500 stores in the US, Mexico, and Brazil, over 100,000 AutoZoners. As we seek you out, seek us out. Make sure that you are intentional in partnering with MMBC, reaching out directly. We've got a ton of information. I mentioned our CSR report that's online. There's a ton of information for public dissemination where you can say, okay, what I'm doing aligns directly with what the company is doing. And you make that case. Nobody, let me say it again. Nobody can tell your story better than you can, and you will. And you don't have to be extremely polished in doing so, but tell your story. Tell about why this impacts you. Tell about the value that you add to the community. But it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be a dual burden on us as the organization and also on the vendor and philanthropic community.
That's great. Well, this has been a great morning for me. I hope that you all have enjoyed it, and I hope that our attendees have enjoyed it. We've had an opportunity today to learn a lot from 3 major institutions in our community and how they have continued to keep diversity, inclusion, and equity high on their list of operational priorities. This is really important and reassuring for our community. And so I just want to thank all 3 of you for the work that you're doing for Memphis and for the Memphis area. And thank you to Joselle and the MMBC for allowing me the opportunity to serve today. I've enjoyed it as well and enjoyed meeting all of you. Thank you